freaking hell. My mother's house just disintegrated. It was a brick house. All the houses down there floated down the street like somebody's guiding them.
Was it solely the water that broke the levee, or was it the force of this barge that now sits where homes once did? Joe Edwards says neither. People are so bitter, so disenfranchised in this neighborhood, they actually think the city did it, blowing up the levee to save richer neighborhoods like the French Quarter. So you're convinced?
I noticed it happened.
That they broke the levee on purpose?
They blew it.
New Orleans.
Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I had better news for you, but we are facing a storm that most of us have feared. A mandatory evacuation order is hereby called for all of the parish of Orleans.
Sunday morning in New Orleans, the National Weather Service issued a bulletin predicting a hurricane along the Gulf Coast of what it called unprecedented strength. The area will be uninhabitable for weeks, the bulletin predicted, and it went on to say, human suffering incredible by modern standards.
The National Weather Service told us we're scared for you. We're deeply scared for you. Now, this is government officials. They don't use those words.
In the wake of 9/11, the newly created Department of Homeland Security had come up with a detailed plan for responding to such disasters. Nearly 500 pages long, it claimed to ensure seamless integration in the event of a national emergency of the federal government and local and state authorities.
Before we get started, I want to very briefly introduce Michael Jackson.
At noon that Sunday, Michael Brown, the director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, presided over a teleconference with state, local, and federal officials.
We're going to move fast, we're going to move quick, and we're going to do whatever it takes to help disaster victims.
President Bush joined the briefing from his home in Texas.
I want to assure the folks at the state level that we are fully prepared to not only help you during the storm, but we will move in whatever resources and assets we have at our disposal.
Words like quick and fast, resources and assets sound reassuring, but it now appears that officials from President Bush on down to the local level were often using words that signified different things to different people. Even terms like mandatory evacuation.
And folks, we've said it all morning, we will say it again. If you can get out of town, you need to get out of town.
28% of the population of the city of New Orleans is below the poverty line. And poor people tend to be less well informed and tend to be less mobile, not to have cars to get out.
And so many of those who wanted to leave New Orleans but couldn't headed for the city's Superdome. By 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon, some 10,000 people had already gathered there.
We've been out here since 9 o'clock. They need to organize this crowd.
At daybreak, Katrina was roaring, and visibility was next to nothing. The 9 New Orleans firefighters riding her out inside the Lake Marina Tower couldn't see much, but heard plenty.
The wind coming through back here was, it was like a freight train coming through there, howling noise it was making.
Just after 9 o'clock in the morning, Captain Paul Helmers, an 18-year veteran, saw something he wasn't expecting. Water rising in the back parking lot.
I would say about 10 minutes after we saw it rising, I was pretty certain that the levee had to be breached. It was rising at such a rate.
Helmers grabbed his video camera and went up to this top floor stairwell. With the building swaying, he searched and searched, but couldn't see the breach until visibility cleared enough for him to zoom in a half a mile away to the water pouring in.
When I saw that, I'm sure my coworkers had the same reaction. My heart just dropped. Even though I knew the levees were breached before that, seeing it, and just knowing that the fate of the city was sealed.
Surreal. You took it in and you wondered how high the water was going to be in the city.
And you can see that 6-foot wall is gone.
My first instinct when we saw the levee break was, this is bigger than 9/11. I thought that the fatalities would be in the, thousands, if not tens of thousands. So it was, it was heavy.
Heavy because it was their neighborhood, their homes. Captain Joe Fincher, just a couple of days before Katrina, had videotaped his Lakeview house for insurance purposes. Now, it was filling up with 10 feet of water. The floodwaters also destroyed the Lakeview home of Captain Gordon Case. He didn't see it happen, but he had firefighters on his crew watch from above as the water swallowed their homes.
I guess it would have to be torture to know that you can see the water rising on your house and not be able to do anything about it.
But as the water kept rising, they knew what their role would be. Rescues.
As soon as we saw the water come in the parking lot, I'm thinking people are going to be dying soon. That was my first thought.
By early afternoon, when the winds calmed enough, the firefighters swam out to find a boat. They found this blue one that today still sits along the condo parking lot wall. Captain Case hot-wired it, and they made the first of many life-saving trips into the neighborhood near the breach.
He was standing in his bathtub with water up to his chin when we got over there. And me and my firefighter, Pat Ball, broke the window out and was able to rescue him.
We only had a crew of 9 men here. As you can see, there's thousands of houses.
The firefighters say there's a reason you haven't heard their story so many months after the storm. The video they shot of the levee breach was used in the recently completed congressional investigation. And while they testified, they were told to stay quiet about what they saw until it was over.
And while they testified, they were told to stay quiet about what they saw until it was over. They were told to stay quiet about what they saw. They were told to stay quiet about what they saw.
They say what they saw wasn't what was being reported in those first few months.
They say what they saw wasn't what was being reported in those first few months.
They knew the levees didn't overtop, which was initially thought. They knew the 9:45 a.m. time frame of the levee breach was also off.
Oh, no, it certainly broke by 9 o'clock in the morning.
Captains Helmers, Case, and Fincher combined have been in the department for 56 years. But it will be those first 5 days of Katrina they'll never forget.
The whole thing I took in kind of like a snapshot in my mind. Remember this because this is something you're going to remember the rest of your life.
This is the actual levee that runs along the canal on the eastern side of the city, and when the hurricane hit, the water came through the canal at such force it was apparently too much. You can see the massive breach here, and when you look around the corner, you can see what the water did to the lower 9th Ward. It completely destroyed neighborhoods.
I heard something go, boom!
Joe Edwards rushed to get himself and as many neighbors as possible into his truck. They drove to this bridge, where they've been living ever since.
My house broke in half. My mother's house just disintegrated. It was a brick house. All the houses down there floated down the street like somebody's guiding them.
Was it solely the water that broke the levee, or was it the force of this barge that now sits where homes once did? Joe Edwards says neither. People are so bitter, so disenfranchised in this neighborhood, they actually think the city did it, blowing up the levee to save richer neighborhoods like the French Quarter.
So you're convinced
I noticed it happened.
that they broke the levee on purpose?
They blew it.
They actually think the city did it, blowing up the levee to save richer neighborhoods like the French Quarter. I noticed it happened that they broke the levee on purpose. They blew it. They blew it.
That storm was so powerful and it pushed so much water. There's no way anyone could have calculated would levy the dynamite to have the kind of impact to save the French Quarter.
An LSU expert who looked at the video today says while the barge may have caused it, it was most likely the sheer force of the water that brought the levee along the lower 9th Ward down.
This is an inverted T-wall on pilings, and there's sheet pile that go down to between about minus 55 and minus 65 feet. The water can't come through that sheet pile except a little bit of minor seepage at the joints. But you can't get a breach through that sheet pile with this design. Again, you can get a little seepage through the joints, and sheet pile isn't hermetically sealed, but you're not going to get a breach. You really This is a design of T-wall that is very secure. We didn't have a single wall of this design fail in Katrina. So we're very confident that the wall is good. You can get a little bit of seepage through the joints. The ground here has been very disturbed. There's a lot of stuff in the ground, old sandbags and rock and stuff like that. So we're getting a little bit of seepage through it, but it's of no concern. It's not a danger to anybody.
Good evening. I'm speaking to you from the city of New Orleans. Nearly empty, still partly underwater, and waiting for life and hope to return. Eastward from Lake Pontchartrain, across the Mississippi coast, to Alabama and into Florida, millions of lives were changed in a day by a cruel and wasteful storm. And all who question the future of the Crescent City need to know, there is no way to imagine America without New Orleans. And this great city will rise again. They must be even better and stronger than before the storm. Within the Gulf region are some of the most beautiful and historic places in America. As all of us saw on television, there's also some deep, persistent poverty in this region as well. That poverty has roots in a history of racial discrimination, which cut off generations from the opportunity of America. We have a duty to confront this poverty with bold action. So let us restore all that we have cherished from yesterday, and let us rise above the legacy of inequality.
How many people you shoot? 38 people.
Gleason said he didn't know how many of those 38 people died.
Oh, I
tried to shoot to put them down. We didn't try to shoot and kill.
Oh, okay. So did you kill
a number of them?
How many did you kill roughly?
I had heard about Paul Gleason before, but seeing him now on video is really compelling and really interesting.
It was a human drama with emotions and tensions running high. Patty Connie is still trying to recover physically and emotionally.
They really did a number on me.
From the day police forced her from her home.
It was traumatic. All of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door, and they said, "Let us in."
Patty tried to explain. She was on dry land, she had plenty of food and water, and didn't want to abandon her dogs. But it didn't matter.
If you see 6 or 8 police that look like linebackers pushing you in a corner, you're in shock. I'm saying, look at all my food. I got plenty of food. They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Then, Patty showed them a small revolver she was carefully holding in the palm of her hand. A camera crew was there to capture what unfolded next.
I said, "It's not even loaded." And I dropped it on the floor.
You got a gun?
Well, they punched me in the face.
Relax now.
Look at my black and blue marks. Look at what they did to me. They dragged me out of here. I really thought they were going to kill me. I really did.
We were coming back across the lake is when we got stopped by Coast Guard and St. Tammany Sheriff's Department and the National Guard by gunpoint.
We had identification. We were coming back from a house that we were taking the weapons out of so criminals wouldn't break in and steal them. And we've had policemen tell us that that's what they wanted us to do. But not the sheriff in St. Tammany. They just wanted to confiscate them from us.
We felt like criminals at the time when they come up to us with M16s or AR-15s, whatever it was, but there were 4 of them with rifles and holding on us with our hands in the air until they got in our boat.
So they got on the boat and they asked us, "Do you have any loaded weapons?" Yes, we do. They're in the 2 back compartments. Wayne went to show them where the gun was. And he screams, "Don't touch it. Don't even move. I'll get it."
I thought it felt like it was un-American and that we had been violated when they, took. Like I say, we were shells out. We were just sitting around looking at each other and said, we just got our guns taken away from us.
They took them. And they didn't have a right to take them. They didn't have a reason to take them. That was the thing. We did nothing wrong. But they took them anyway. He said, be thankful we're taking your guns here. Why should I be thankful? Well, if they catch you with them on land, they're going to take you straight to jail.
We live in proof that all they have to do is say, look, this is the law.
You had that feeling that you were violated. They took something from you. They stole something from you. That's the only way to put it. They took something that they didn't have a right to take.
What'd you come and get my gun for? I'm a good citizen. Marie Galatis, a Baptist minister, faced the same story in her neighborhood. The same threats by thugs, the same lack of police. But she never once felt afraid.
And I had my Bible, and I had my gun, and I knew I was safe. And I tell you what, I'm a Annie Oakley if you come fool with me or my family. I'm gonna let you have it, buddy.
That's true, Elizabeth, and good evening from New Orleans. Here, the police and the National Guard find themselves in a very difficult position tonight to try to carry out an order to force people from the city without actually using force. Today in New Orleans, they got a lot tougher on the holdouts.
Police department, come home!
Not only the flooded areas, but New Orleans' driest and wealthiest neighborhoods, too.
Police department!
The police and National Guard going street by street, house to house.
We need to make sure, too, that whenever we knock on doors, people refuse to leave. We need to make note, call it in.
They say there are no orders to use force, just strong persuasion, sometimes entering open houses with guns drawn, and instructions to disarm anyone inside.
You say guns will be taken. No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
You say guns will be taken. No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
That happened today in this wealthy neighborhood where homeowners had armed themselves to protect their mansions. Residents were handcuffed on the ground. In the end, police took their weapons but let them stay in their homes.
They were a little bit threatened because our weapons were bigger than their weapons.
For many of the police and guard troops, it is an uncomfortable job to do this in an American city. This guard unit occupied a church, using it as a base camp. They had to leave a note because they could not get hold of the pastor to get permission.
It is surreal. Yeah, you never expect to do this in your own country.
Chris Montgomery says he'd rather be in Iraq than patrolling American neighborhoods.
Walking up and down these streets, you don't want to think about the stuff that you're going to have to do. Somebody pops around the corner.
We shoot in America.
Yeah.
Somebody pops around the corner. We shoot in America.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm not doing good.
What happened?
The house just split in half.
Your house split in half?
Right here on Hollyham, Bayview. Back, we came up in the roof, all the way to the roof, and water came and the house just opened up, divided.
Who was at your house with you?
My wife.
Where is she now?
Can't find her body. She gone.
You can't find your wife?
Oh, she told that bird. She told me. I tried. I hold her hand.
Jennifer cries and wipes away tears as she tries to get information that may help to reunite him with his wife.
Yes, my kid.
What's your wife's name in case we can put this out there?
Tony Jackson.
Okay, and what's your name?
Hardy Jackson.
Where are you guys going?
We ain't got nowhere to go, nowhere I'm going. I'm lost. That's all I had. That's all I had. What I'm gonna do?
Katrina is proving to be a death.
They put 2 or 3 more bodies around there where I stayed at. Laying right there in the mud.
You guys, you take care of your boys, okay?
Okay.
Katrina is proving to be a deadly storm.
We know about the engineering failures.
What that has done is caused us to question the integrity of all the other flood walls in the system. We have to go back and check the designs.
We heard about the drive-by levee inspections with inspectors spending most of the time at lunch.
We heard about the drive-by levee inspections with inspectors spending most of the time at lunch.
They call inspection, ride there as fast as you can, look at it, oh yeah, the grass is growing, keep going, let's go.
But Wayne Weiser says everyone missed the real smoking gun.
This is worse than smoking gun. This is like a smoking cannon.
Weiser spent almost 40 years working at the Corps of Engineers, 20 of them as a supervisor of levees and waterways. Bothered by the perception that Corps design issues were the main cause of the levee failures, he spent most of his retirement digging for more info. And here's what he found: an East Jefferson Levee District contract from 1992 that shows the only true picture of what dredging work from 1990 did to the bottom of the canal. And what it shows is devastating.
It shows that the side was eroded like Mr. Chatry had anticipated. And that erosion of taking a channel, bank, and the levee took away all the material that was needed to hold the pollens in place. And when the pollens didn't have nothing to hold them, they collapsed.
Mr. Chatry is Fred Chatry, the late chief engineer of the New Orleans District of the Corps of Engineers. In 1984, he approved a New Orleans Sewerage and Water Board plan to widen the channel in the 17th Street Canal. It was supposed to help with drainage, and it was supposed to be uniform on both banks of the canal. But then, Jefferson Parish backed out of the deal. So Chatry wrote this letter in 1988, warning about how dredging on the Orleans side alone could cause scouring on the underwater levee. He directed the project managers to do annual surveys of the canal bottom to make sure. He wrote, quote, "These surveys are required to detect erosion into the control lines, which, if it occurs, could cause failure of the subject levee." Well, the surveys were never done.
New Orleans District, the Orleans Levee Board both say they didn't know about the annual surveys, and they never received copy of any of it.
So they didn't follow Chatry's directive to do the annual surveys?
It was like one of these documents that goes into the file system, never to be read.
The fact that nobody had checked for erosion was one of the most shocking revelations after Katrina. It came up at this U.S. Senate hearing in December 2005.
Am I hearing that we do not have the capacity to determine whether the kind of structural damage that was occurring over a period of time could have been identified and then prevented? Colonel?
Senator, I believe that, from a visual, we typically do visual inspections. I don't know of any physical inspections that the levee district or the Corps does post-construction.
But what we didn't know until now is that there was one survey of the canal bottom post-construction, and it could have told the local levee district and the Corps that things were not right, if only someone had noticed. This is a cross-section of the canal right at the spot that ended up breaching 13 years later. It was created in 1992 when Jefferson Parish belatedly decided to finally join the dredging project. Look at all the supporting levee material they removed on the Orleans side in 1990. And then this. The red line is the slope of the levee that should have been dredged. And this is how much it went beyond that line in just 2 years.
About 4 feet deeper than it should have been in this area right here.
Bob Turner, regional director for the local levee authority, says dredging contractors would have been paid for any material they removed up to that line, nothing beyond it. He says it's unclear whether it was over-dredged or if it eroded.
Chatry's predictions and figures were actually well-founded.
That's Cal Berkeley engineering professor Bob B. He led one of several independent groups that performed exhaustive studies of what went wrong. None of them located the survey drawings Weiser found.
That's new information that helps us understand now much better why the breach took place on the Orleans Parish side. So I think it's clear that it was a substantial contributor. It couldn't or shouldn't have been ignored.
If anybody had looked at those drawings, they might have seen the problems developing. Instead, no further surveys were done on the Orleans side of the canal until 2 years after Katrina. And on the Jefferson side, there was so little information that the Corps' own investigators weren't even sure if the dredging was done.
It's not just the rising water. It's not just the devastated homes. A big part of Katrina's legacy will be the health problems she leaves behind for a very long time. Many people have no clean water to drink and no safe food to eat. Mosquitoes will breed West Nile virus in the pools of water. People have already died of carbon monoxide poisoning because they lost electricity and tried to use generators in their homes.
We're always racing the clock. We're racing the clock in terms of possible injury. We're racing the clock in terms of illness. We're racing the clock in terms of food and water.
In a conference call Tuesday morning, officials from states pummeled by Katrina pleaded for assistance from the federal government and from neighboring states. Mississippi asked Florida to get food and water to people in Biloxi near the border. Florida responded that it already had sent emergency workers who'd found people completely out of contact with the outside world, desperate for food and water. An Alabama official warned about a significant hazardous material situation in Mobile Bay. A Mississippi official put it bluntly. He said people will be dying not because the water is coming up, but because we can't get them medical treatment.
We have several dozen public health officers who are currently on the ground. We have several hundred additional ones on standby and on the way. We have dozens of pallets of supplies, first aid material, medical supplies, basic things being shipped to the region.
One of the biggest problems, contaminated water.
There's all the chemicals within the city, from the gasoline storage facilities, sewage plants, and of course coffins. We will have a large number of coffins released. This whole mix together in New Orleans is what we term this toxic gumbo.
Another, contaminated food.
Don't eat any perishable food that's been without refrigeration for more than 4 hours.
Of course, for the millions without power, those 4 hours passed a long time ago, leaving many people without food, without clean water, without medical care, and officials trying to figure out how to get it to them.
At Touro Hospital, 10 patients have died overnight. There was only one working telephone in the entire hospital and a small staff which was low on supplies. They were forced to make some very tough choices. Correspondent Bob Woodruff was there.
Well, what we're doing today is the physicians are going around and evaluating every patient. If they can say their name, we're giving them an IV fluid to make their tank better, to kind of give them a boost.
What if they can't say their name?
We're not giving them IV fluids. We're going to consider them not viable.
So they'll die.
If we don't get help soon, they will die.
It's not been easy for the staff because we're really doing minimal care right here.
On the roof, they said that if the patient can say their name, they'll try to treat them. If they can't say their name, that's it. We can't do anything. Is that one of the cases here?
She can still say her name, so we're trying.
Federal, state, and local agencies are also cooperating to sustain life.
I was in the Superdome when Katrina struck. A couple of days later, I was here at the convention center. This place was far worse. There were thousands and thousands of people and days in without any help. They were desperate.
We can't take this. We've been out here for 3 days.
They begged us to take them with us. They assumed that we were leaving every day. We weren't. We never left the city. And so when we told that to them, they then said, well, you gotta have some way of talking to people. We said, well, we have satellite phones. And that's when people began tearing up pieces of paper or grabbing any cardboard or writing down telephone numbers. It was certain if someone knew that they would come and be rescued. And they gave me the numbers and begged that I'd call. And every evening when I got done with work and when there were a few free moments, I'd start making my way down the list. The first thing I realized is that nobody answers their phone anymore. It's always voicemail after voicemail, and the message I would always leave was the same. You don't know me. I'm a reporter. I'm in New Orleans. I saw your uncle today in the convention center. Or I saw your aunt. I saw your sister. They're okay. One of the people actually wrote specifically what I was supposed to say on the phone call. And it goes, please call my daughter Amethyst and tell her daddy, quote, ain't dead yet. I hung on to that note all these years just because it was a reminder of how desperate people were.
Hurricane Katrina, a Category 5, will be a killer. Citizens are ordered to flee. But there's one group of people, 7,000 of them, who are not allowed to leave.
Every day, it looked like the water was getting higher and higher.
And I didn't think there was no dry land nowhere. We panicked. Anybody would panic.
There was no drinking water, there was no food, and it was hot as hell, and nobody had a clue what was going on. For 4 days, this is how it was. For 4 days, this is how it was.
Staff faced a riot.
They were shaking on the bars, they were setting fires, they were screaming, they were popping their cells, coming out of their cells.
You were about to come face to face with killers who were afraid and who were angry.
Vital forensic evidence stored in this courthouse basement was destroyed, contaminated by floodwater. The justice system, already close to breakdown, collapsed.
Katrina blew the system apart, and it made it such that we were so disconnected that we simply could not function.
In the chaos of Katrina, the prisoners were left behind. In its aftermath, their rights withheld. Their story has never been told.
They abandoned the prison.
We just was left there to die.
They abandoned the prison. We just was left there to die.
Look at that wind. Listen to that wind, baby. Look at that wind.
Each of the prison buildings was soon cut off as the city's levees crumbled and water flooded in. This was filmed by one of the guards.
When the water came, it rose so fast, everybody got trapped. Here come tons of water at you. We just wiped out everything. Where I was, we had water, and they moved us to a higher level.
So where was it up to on you when they moved you?
When I first moved, I was up to here.
First, the power failed, then the backup generators. Cell blocks were left with no light, no air, and no communications.
Look at it. Now this is the eye of the storm.
In the largest prison block, Sheriff's Deputy Rhonda Ducray was on duty, 4 months pregnant.
When Katrina did hit, I worked the 3rd floor. We lost power, we didn't have any phone, we didn't have any communication at all. Our hallways were flooded, tables were flying back and forward. I had a flashlight that ran for so long it was losing batteries. I could not see my hand in front of my face. I could not make my proper security checks because I could not see where I was going, and there was water everywhere. It was very scary. Everything was chaotic because we didn't really have a plan.
It wasn't no way we was going to be evacuated after all at any time because they didn't have no evacuation plan, period. We just was left there to die.
Cardell Williams, arrested for possession of drugs, had yet to be charged. He was in Templeman 3, the worst hit block, with over 1,000 other inmates.
The water started getting high, so after the water got to our waist level, the deputies came. They did have deputies come at that point. You know what they told us? To get in your cells, and they was locking the doors. They panicked. They didn't know what to do. They panicked, and they were telling me get in the cell. So I said, I'm not getting in the cell. They had mace in their hand. I wasn't worrying about them spraying me with that mace or nothing like that. They had shotguns too when they came in there, talking about getting in the cell. I'm not gonna get in no cell and I see this water rise.
Vincent Norman did go in his cell, 1 level up. He's a chef. He'd been locked away a few days before for an unpaid fine of $70.
The whole bottom floor was covered with water. Looked like a pool. You couldn't even see the stairs or the tables or the bottom cells anymore. It looked like nothing but just water. Like you just had the top level where we were, and everything else was just water. You couldn't see the floors or anything. And it was sewer water. You could see the stool floating around in there, the smell of urine. It was bad. We were already overcrowded as it was. They just stuck us 8 men to a 2-man cell. And in that situation, you're not supposed to lock anybody up because you won't be able to open cells. And that's what happened to me. My situation was one of the ones where the cell I was in couldn't be opened.
And in that situation, you're not supposed to lock anybody up because you won't be able to open cells. And that's what happened to me. My situation was one of the ones where the cell I was in couldn't be opened.
So we couldn't get out. We had washed ourselves off in the toilet. And that was our source of water for the whole duration while we was in there. We had no food. Like I said, the only source of water we had was the urinal in the toilet. That was it.
Fearing a riot, their guards began to retreat.
We asked the guys to come back. One of the deputies, were they going to come back? That's when they threw 2 mace canisters in our cell and told us to shut up and get away from the cell door because we was making too much noise. We basically were just asking for some help. Mace means when they take the canister of mace and they spray you down with it. So it really eats at your skin and it burns and it's real bad. You'll come up out your clothes, you'll be naked, standing there and there has no relief for it except to wash it off, and they don't have no water. It was a trip that you could treat another human being like that, knowing what was going on outside.
Last time Vincent saw a guard for several days. He and his cellmates were now alone.
Just left us like dogs. It was an experience that I wouldn't wish on nobody. We just was in the cell, 8 of us in a 2-man cell. No food, no water. They had 4 white guys and 4 black guys that was in there. And, we became real close. You lost a lot of your inhibitions up in there, I can tell you that much. If you had any kind of pride about using the bathroom in front of another person or sleeping next to another person, you let all that go. It became a survival. We got real close with the people you ended with because it didn't really matter what race you were because we were always in the same boat. The only thing we had on our minds was survival, so we had to depend on each other.
Prison blocks now became a shelter for the families of staff trapped by the flood.
We still got a bunch of babies hanging around. A lot of babies. This is how we're going to be made to live for the next few days. I guess however long we can do until they evacuate us.
There, with her 4 children, was Deputy Rhonda Ducray.
They thought the water was going to keep rising and rising and rising. They thought we were going to be stuck there to drown. They were asking the question. They were, Mama, we gonna die? And that haunts them.
2 days after Katrina passed all the National Guard checkpoints on the interstate, every road was barricaded and blocked off and guarded to keep folks from accessing the metropolitan New Orleans area. And as we drove in through Kenner, past the airport, on I-10 into Metairie, where Gray Insurance Company is located, I was just jaw-dropped and overwhelmed by the sight I saw on both sides of the interstate. People with grocery carts and babies in diapers pushing down the service road, begging for food, water, what have you. And his description to me then was, it just looks like a war zone. And it did.
I personally ended up in a hotel room in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I had my flood files, a few notes, and my company contact sheet. But luckily, I had my family with me, who I quickly deputized into claims takers and answering calls. And we knew from CNN and watching the other media outlets the areas of our city that were devastated and flooded. So we started filing claims, trying to get ahead of the curve, so to speak. And when we did make contact with our customers, hopefully we'd have a claim number and an adjuster's name and number. for them to get their process started. It took me about a week to get back into Louisiana, slowly working my way back from our...
Many sought financial relief from the federal government during that difficult time. But as WDSU anchor Rachel Wolf tells us, that help is now costing them more than they bargained for.
Amy Harmon joined the military in 2003 and moved to Belle Chase Air Station, where she lived until Katrina hit in 2005.
We were forced evacuees. We were told to leave the base, and at that time they had no disaster plan. So we were just told basically to pack a weekend bag. We thought it would be just a false alarm.
But it was not a false alarm, and Harmon was displaced for months.
And actually FEMA had moved into the barracks, and we were given 20 minutes to basically get whatever we could carry. I flew in on a C-130 to the base, and I guess that was probably about a month after the storm, and had about 20 minutes to clear out as much as I could in my room.
She returned in December amidst chaos and was made an offer she couldn't refuse.
They sat us down, they said, look, you know, FEMA's given $2,000 to anyone who was a forced evacuee. If you were a resident of New Orleans, which we qualified for, and you were a forced evacuee, this $2,000 yours, we're ordering you to take it. At the time, I took the money.
A year later, FEMA sent her a letter asking for proof of residency in New Orleans during the storm. Harmon was puzzled.
My home of records was in Gulfport, Mississippi. As an active duty military person, it's completely legal to be stationed anywhere in the world and keep your home of records wherever it's going to be.
Even more puzzled when she was told to repay the money.
So I started paying $100 installments per month. By the third month, on my fourth payment, the fourth month, I suppose, they were ordered not to take payment from me. They said I didn't know the money. And I said, okay, well, am I getting any documentation for this? They said, no, it's just, you know, we can't take any more payments from you.
Years passed, and Harmon assumed the problem had been solved until the federal treasury contacted her this year, threatening wage garnishment.
I'm basically in collections for money that I don't owe, and they've added about $600 worth of charges on there for late fees.
Since then, Harmon's been going back and forth between the Treasury Department and FEMA, trying to appeal. Then last week, she got this letter from FEMA that said, quote, a congressional inquiry and class action lawsuit regarding the fairness of collecting debts led to a mandate that FEMA stop all collection measures until the matter was resolved. The lawsuit was settled. FEMA was required to reprocess all registrations for disaster assistance between 2005 and 2010 before collections could resume. The applicant's file was reviewed, and her debt is valid, end quote.
I won't file my taxes. I'll quit my job before I do it. I'm serious. I don't believe in paying something back that I shouldn't pay back. This is wrong. I mean, this is tyranny.
And this isn't an isolated incident. WDSU has been contacted by numerous individuals with the same exact problem. Students and other citizens. We'll follow up and let you know what happens. Back to you.
Well, FEMA contacted us late this evening and saying in part that their authority to waive the debt expired on March 26, 2013, after a law passed by Congress. You can find the entire FEMA statement at WDSU.com.
Mississippi has recovered more than $5.7 million from settlements after Hurricane Katrina. Those cases were regarding misconduct by homeowner insurance companies. That money is now returned to the State Development Authority Disaster Relief Office.
But it strikes me as being eerily similar, the phases that the Haitian people are going through and what I experienced after Hurricane Katrina. And I'm still very concerned that not only is our nation not prepared for a catastrophe, but the whole world seems to be struggling with dealing with this catastrophe. If another catastrophe like Katrina happened in our country, I'm not sure we're ready for it because we haven't made the fundamental changes that we needed to make.
Former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin will serve his 10-year prison sentence. The WDSU team broke the story that Nagin will be sent to a federal facility in Texas. I-Team reporter Travis Mackel is here with more on why Nagin is going to that specific prison. Travis?
Scott, he's going there because that's where the Federal Bureau of Prisons assigned him. Nagin's report date has not changed, meaning in about 20 days he will report to jail to begin serving that 10-year prison sentence. The satellite prison camp adjacent to the Federal Correctional Institution in Texarkana, Texas, houses just over 300 inmates. And on September 8th, former New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin will be included in that number. Sources tell the WDSU team the Federal Bureau of Prisons has ordered the 58-year-old to start serving his 10-year prison sentence at that facility on the Texas-Arkansas state line.
Judge Ginger Berrigan recommended to the Bureau of Prisons that Nagin serve his jail time for his bribery convictions at the federal prison in Oakdale, Louisiana, which is about 3 hours from New Orleans. But that decision is up to the Bureau of Prisons, and they selected Texarkana. It's not the first time the Bureau has disregarded a judge's recommendation in a high-profile public corruption case. In 2013, former Jefferson Parish President Aaron Broussard was ordered to start serving his sentence for bribery at a federal facility in North Carolina, despite a judge recommending Oakdale.
If you owned or rental or business property that was damaged by Hurricane Katrina and you received insurance money, you want to pay attention to this next story because come the end of the year, Uncle Sam could have a hefty tax bill for you. WDSU News reporter Rosa Flores is live on your side with what you need to know. Rosa, good morning.
Well, good morning, Melanie. Let's go back to 2005. If the insurance money you received for your damaged rental or business property exceeded what is called the basis of your property, you had a gain at the time. But here is what most folks did. They didn't pay taxes on that gain because it was deferred. It's something known as an involuntary conversion. Now, the Katrina Tax Act gave folks 5 years to reinvest that money they received without paying any gain. So fast forward to 2010, 5 years later, the time is up to reinvest that cash. Now, a lot of landlords and business owners have until December 31st of this year to use that money. If not, they could owe Uncle Sam taxes on that gain that they didn't pay back in 2005. Now, here's an example. If your rental property was worth $95,000, you received $95,000 in insurance money, you didn't pay taxes on those gains, and you reinvested all the cash, you're free and clear. You should be fine because you did exactly what that Katrina Tax Act was designed to do. However, if you reinvested only $70,000, that creates a tax event. You could owe taxes. If you reinvested only $85,000, that also creates a tax event because you could owe taxes on that money. Now, each tax situation is different. In most cases are very complex, but if you owe taxes, here's what you can do to avoid paying extra fines, extra fees. Talk to your tax accountant, amend your 2005 tax return, make any changes and updates, and if you owe taxes, you want to pay those on time so your bill doesn't keep growing.
They wasn't fair to nobody. Black, white, everybody.
Stop in any city along the Louisiana Gulf Coast and you'll find people still upset with their insurance companies a year after Hurricane Katrina. But while the stories are similar,
the money is going to run out. My insurance money is going to run out.
The way people of different races and economic backgrounds are handling the situation is quite different. These are the 8,000 complaints filed with Louisiana's insurance commissioner since the storm. What's surprising is that even though the hardest hit areas were in New Orleans, a city that was 2/3 black, nearly 75% of the closed complaints were filed by homeowners from predominantly white areas.
Even though the hardest hit areas were in New Orleans, a city that was 2/3 black, nearly 75% of the closed complaints were filed by homeowners from predominantly white areas.
We spent several days talking to hurricane victims in the predominantly black lower 9th Ward of New Orleans and couldn't find one person who had filed a complaint with the state. Most black victims said they either didn't know about the state agency or didn't trust government to help them. And that means, unlike many white victims, they've just accepted insurance settlements that didn't cover their losses. Alloyd Edinburgh is spending his life savings just to rebuild.
Am I mad? Hell yeah, I'm mad. Who complained about it? What's the use? Who am I going to just go run to a lawyer, run to this one, run to that, and spend all my time back and forth with that?
Company both in the bedrooms.
Aretha Kitchens lost 2 homes in the storm, hers and one her son was living in.
My husband didn't want to be bothered because he told, I asked him about, why we don't sue the insurance company. He said, for what? They ain't going to do nothing no way. So white just decided they was going to go forward. Black just, they just give up either.
Richard and Cindy Little didn't give up. When their insurer offered only 2/3 of what it would cost to repair their home, the Littles filed a complaint, wrote dozens of letters, and kept careful notes and records of the process. Their work paid off, with the insurer eventually agreeing to pay the full amount. But the Littles know how difficult the fight was and understand not everyone would have been able to follow through.
We sat back and we said, look, we've got the money. We've already been making the repairs. We can afford to sit back and wait and say, no, we're going to get the money that we're putting out, that we're entitled to. I can see where people with not as much education, not as much knowledge about how to file claims, how to write letters, how to basically assert themselves, how they could, just take what's given them.
We took our findings to the Black Insurance Association of America, and its president agrees education is key.
So we need to reevaluate how we're disseminating information to consumers, as well as helping the insurance companies to make sure they're sensitive and educating their consumers about insurance and what their insurance needs should be.
That may not be enough to make a difference for Alloyd Edinburgh and his Ninth Ward neighbors, but could change the way future hurricanes are handled by insurance companies and regulators alike.